distinguished guests, thank you for joining us. Please do remain seated as we bring you the start of the first ever Global Interfaith Summit.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Your Excellency Sheikh Nahyan Mubarak Al Nahyan, UAE Minister of Culture and Tolerance. Your Excellencies, Your Eminences, Your Holiness, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us at the first ever Global Interfaith Summit. Now, the word interfaith leads us to believe that we are all connected in faith, and that we are all created with the innate ability to converse with and try to understand each other. And that's why today's event is so important. It's this quest for knowledge and information sharing that has brought us together in this room. Now, this year's edition of the Global Interfaith Summit is the first ever edition of the event, and it's rather appropriately titled Towards a Compassionate World Through Tolerance and Interfaith Understanding. And with that in mind, I'm delighted to welcome to the stage to deliver his keynote address. Please welcome His Excellency Sheikh Nahyan Mubarak Al Nahyan, UAE Minister of Tolerance and Coexistence. Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Your Excellency, Marina Sarjani, Your Excellency, Mogul Engel, journalists, ladies and gentlemen, of the many faiths who have assembled here today, welcome to Dubai and to the United Arab Emirates. Seeing us all here together raises hope for the future of our world. The Ministry of Tolerance and Coexistence, I'll be wearing the glasses, nobody take pictures. The first time I use it. The Ministry of Tolerance and Coexistence is honored to organize this interfaith meeting as part of Tolerance and Inclusivity Week at the Expo 2020 Dubai. We are pleased to be able to host this event that brings together scholars, clerks, and intellectuals for interfaith dialogue and action. We thank our partners who are helping with us to organize this. The Expo 2020 Dubai, the G20 Interfaith Forum 2021, the Italian Pavilion at the Expo 2020 Dubai, and the Higher Committee of Human Fraternity. In the United Arab Emirates, we have always strived to serve as a catalyst for peace, tolerance, understanding, and stability in the world. A recent milestone in these efforts was when His Holiness Pope Francis and His Eminence Imam Ahmed Al-Tayyib gracefully accepted the invitation of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi and Deputy Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, to visit the United Arab Emirates and to issue the historic Abu Dhabi Declaration on Human Fraternity. The Crown Prince's invitation came from the heart of a leader whose tolerance mirrors that of our founder, the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, who believed that tolerance, compassion, and dialogue are essential to enabling understanding and peace. Sheikh Zayed welcomed to the UAE men and women of sound moral character, irrespective of their nationality, religion, culture, ethnicity, or economic status. He has imparted that wisdom to the Crown Prince, whose energy, vision, and commitment to tolerance and peace have enabled all of us to appreciate the role of the United Arab Emirates plays on the world stage. With His Highness Sheikh Mohammed's guidance and leadership, the UAE is a beacon for tolerance and cooperation in a world characterized by heightened tension and increased divisions. In the UAE, we are a society dedicated to a future of tolerance, compassion, human fraternity, and love of God. We talk to one another. We learn from one another. We work peacefully and productively together. We demonstrate a conviction and an ability to bring hope and optimism to cultural and religious relationships that have long been characterized by doubt and lack of trust. We believe that the only strategy that will reduce the eventuality, eliminate conflict emerging from religious or cultural differences is direct action to find common ground among people of all nations, cultures, and faiths. Common ground is possible when all people come to know and respect one another as equals in their quest for peace and harmony in the world. We in the UAE believe that the need to move away from suspicion and fear and towards mutual trust and acceptance is greater now than ever before. That is why discussions at this meeting here today carry special significance in the year of 2021 in the name of religious faith. People, particularly young people, are committing intolerable acts of violence worldwide. We Muslims know that violent acts carried out in the name of Islam have no religious justification. Islam is a religion of peace and tolerance. هاي الأذان ولا التليفون؟ أذان هنا؟ ما شاء الله. Talking about Islam is a religion of peace and tolerance, so the sanctity of human lives have a very special meaning for us. Actually, in the Quran it says if you take a life of innocent persons, like taking the life of all humanity. If you save a life of a person, like saving all humanity. That's how precious the life that is given to us by God, and only God has the right to take it. These beliefs in human harmony and brotherhood unite us with people of other religious faiths, whatever our differences may be. Understanding, not violence, will lead to peace. Thus, it is perfectly right that your discussions today will proceed at this great site of Expo 2020 Dubai. I offer my thanks and gratitude to the Expo 22 for facilitating this conference. Thank you, Mahazza. The Expo provides us with great opportunities for learning about others, for cultural exchange, for observing human fraternity in action, and in cooperation and joint understandings. The Expo will help us to educate ourselves, to educate public opinion and policymakers. It will hopefully help people around the world to resist hatred, mistrust, and stereotypical attitudes, to respect people of other beliefs, and to live together in peace and harmony. My dear friends, imagine a world in which every committee, organization, community, party, sect, religion, and government shared the objectives of enduring a safe, happy, productive, and prosperous existence for all. That will probably be a world without war. But far more significantly, it will be a world united in the virtues of justice, equality, tolerance, brotherhood, sisterhood, and prosperity. Those are the virtues that have brought you here to this conference that promotes interfaith dialogue and action. At this conference, we will learn, we will be inspired to redouble our efforts. We will reaffirm the priceless nature of free and open dialogue between people of various cultures in the full knowledge that words and reasons bind us together. We are aware of the considerable common ground among tenets of different faiths. For example, in all faiths, a respect for human life, a desire for peace and safety, and an imperative to appreciate each other as valued individuals guides adherence in how to live a worthy life. And understanding that our life on earth is not our ultimate existence unites faith. Therefore, we must be thoughtful and upright in the way we live to realize the potential for broad human development around the globe, while protecting the natural environment given to us free, and we don't pay for it when we take it away, unfortunately. Uniting people of different faiths, finding common ground among those who come from different cultural tradition, harnessing the core values that are common to all religions. These principles should lead people everywhere to work together for a world of mutual understanding, a world of tolerance, empathy, and justice, a world without extremism, violence, hate, a world of peace, prosperity, safety, and a better future for all human beings. That, my friends, would be a world endowed with tolerance and human fraternity in action, a world that will see all of us living and working in moral societies. Tolerance and human fraternity in action will promote dialogue among strangers and will lead to an informed understanding of the identity and difference of human beings. And tolerance and human fraternity in action will help solve many of the world's great global challenges. I'm a strong believer that tolerance and human fraternity will help us recognize the moral imperative for improving the health and safety of all individuals, deal with important environmental issues, solve conflicts and political disagreements, and help improve education and encourage innovation so that all citizens can contribute to a knowledge-based economy. Our job, and the job that I hope this conference will commit itself to, is to help build tidal wave of support for tolerance, human fraternity, and interfaith action around the world. The 21st century, with all its challenges, is giving us an opportunity for interfaith dialogue and action. We are counting on you here today to innovate and put into action new measures that will ensure that people around the world come together as members of one human family. Again, my friends, thank you for assembling here today. I hope we can all work together across cultural and spiritual lines. My best wishes to all of you. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency Sheikh Nahyan, for such inspiring words about interfaith and the constructive dialogue that is needed around the world today. I thought your comments on the need for compassion, tolerance, and to have this dialogue, and how essential it is today if we want to be able to move forward in 2021 and beyond with peace and prosperity. I think that constructive discussion is needed now than more than ever. And that's why today's events and other events like it are so important. Well, our next distinguished speaker this morning is joining us all the way from Italy. She's travelled to Dubai. Now, she's known for the incredible work that she does with bringing nations, organisations and people together to solve some of the many challenges that our modern world faces. Now, her chosen topic this morning is titled Humanity Strengthened in Global Collaboration and Interfaith Dialogue. We are truly honoured to be joined this morning by Her Excellency Marina Sereni, the Italian Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it gives me great honor to welcome you at the Italian Pavilion in Expo 2020 Dubai. I am particularly delighted to attend this Global Interfaith Summit and would like to thank His Excellency Sheikh Nahyan bin Mubarak Al Nahyan for taking this inspiring initiative. Today's event embodies values that are enshrined in Italy's history and culture, such as mutual understanding, cultural and religious diversity, open dialogue and cooperation between the state and faith-based institutions, as well as among different religions. The goal of exploring connections lies at the heart of Expo 2020 Dubai. Its theme rightly suggests that when people join their efforts, they can achieve better results than acting alone. The vision inspiring the Italy Pavilion brings this concept one step further. It shows that we do not need to speak the same language, have the same cultural background, or profess the same religion to understand one another. Beauty, such as any other value that speaks directly to the souls, can bridge any gap and erase any difference. Connecting people has become a global imperative since the pandemic has hit our societies. The health crisis has driven people apart, divided families, and disrupted the social and economic bonds. Rather than triggering solidarity, the pandemic has first led to new waves of discrimination, nationalism, protectionism that only worsened our suffering. From the very beginning, Italy has joined those voices calling for a shared response to the pandemic, on the conviction that within our common home, the suffering of one directly affects the lives of the other members of the human family. Finding common solutions may look costly or time-consuming at first, but ultimate benefits largely exceed costs. In this spirit, multilateralism has always been the one single compass guiding our action. Despite initial challenges, I believe that the pandemic has eventually brought ethics and politics again into connection with one another. I would like to recall three main achievements in this regard. First, people have been put back to the front of the global agenda. Second, the degree of collective commitment to save our planet has increased. Lastly, support to vulnerable countries has emerged as a priority in the global agenda. As G20 chair, Italy has spared no effort to advance these strategic goals. We have decided to place people at the heart of our action and developed the One Health approach, whereby human, animal, and environmental safety are seen as interrelated objectives that need to be pursued simultaneously and in an integrated fashion. We have also committed to reduce vaccination gaps between different world regions, something that indeed amounts to a morally unacceptable imbalance, through our contribution to the COVAX facility. As co-partner of the UK in the organization of the UN Climate Change Conference, COP26, Italy has striven to raise collective ambitions to put our planet on a healthier path and make sure future generations will not have to pay for past mistakes. Intergenerational equity is now being widely recognized as a compelling moral imperative. We have gathered consensus on the need to accelerate progress towards the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, to build back better and to leave no one behind by helping developing countries face the burden of debt and meet their financing needs. Last June in Matera, G20 Foreign Affairs and Development Ministers reaffirmed their commitment to end hunger by 2030. At the G20 summit in Rome, leaders showed strong cohesion and determination towards a sustainable and inclusive recovery. In the enlarged Mediterranean, Italy, alongside its active involvement in finding political solutions to ongoing crises, is committed to support a positive agenda for the protection and shared development of the so-called Mediterranean common goods: security, health, energy, green transition, the environment, blue economy, digital research and innovation, scientific and cultural diplomacy, migration, and, last but not least, interreligious and intercultural dialogue. Religions have clearly played a role in fostering such transition towards a more sustainable worldview in both a mediated and a direct way. Throughout history, religious teachings have helped spread principles such as solidarity, justice, mutual responsibility, and the need to protect human dignity among people and within secular legislations. During the pandemic, religious leaders have raised their voices in defense of the poor and most vulnerable, calling for equity in vaccine distribution and access. Faith-based communities have provided health and other social services to those most in need when state welfare systems have failed to provide adequate care. Religious authorities have also taken strong stances on climate, urging both faithful and decision makers to act swiftly and reverse the trend of environmental deterioration. On October the 4th, in Rome, faith leaders representing the world's major religions and several scientists signed a joint appeal to leaders ahead of the COP26, calling on them to raise their ambition and commitment on climate. At the same time, religious leaders and scientists have pledged, I'm quoting, to deepen their efforts to bring about a change of heart among members of their traditions in the way they relate to earth and to other people. The magnitude of challenges related to health, environment, and development stands as a stark reminder of our common origin as human beings, irrespective of any cultural, social, or religious difference. At the same time, global issues have become a ground for closer cooperation not only among different faiths, but also between states and their religious counterparts. Secular governments and faith institutions share their responsibility to promote solidarity, mutual understanding, and cooperation among people belonging to different faiths. They should join efforts to eradicate discrimination, intolerance, and hatred, focusing especially on youth. Quality and inclusive education is the best antidote to prevent such social plagues that often target minority groups, migrants, and other vulnerable people. Let me, in conclusion, touch upon a point that I deem essential. In order to strengthen our societies, we need to make them more inclusive and enable all components to fully express their potential. Gender equality and women's empowerment are drivers of development, peace, and good governance. Girls and women have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. Advancing their role in the society is another promising area of cooperation between civil and religious actors. Through their unique outreach and advocacy, faith-based institutions can, and let me add, should, greatly contribute to a transition towards new societal models based on women's rights. Less than 3 years ago, on this land, and we have seen the video some minutes ago, two visionary religious leaders, Pope Francis and the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Ahmad al-Tayyib, gifted the world with their outstanding witness on human fraternity. They have offered a powerful example for other religious and secular leaders to follow. Therefore, I wholeheartedly join their appeal to adopt a culture of dialogue as a path, mutual cooperation as a code of conduct, reciprocal understanding as a method and standard. Thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency. Some fascinating fascinating discussions on the importance of education and how essential that is in ensuring that all of our societies are able to promote inclusivity, and whether that means because we're from different cultures, from different faiths and religions, but also so that we have equal opportunities for men and women. And that is certainly something that the UAE is leading the way on. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Well, I'm now very honoured to welcome His Eminence Dr. Muhammad Al-Duwaimi, the Al-Azhar Deputy of the Grand Imam, who has kindly travelled all the way from Egypt to be with us in Dubai this morning. His Eminency will kindly shed light on the topic, faith rooted in human values. Thank you very much, Your Eminence.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. سمى نفسه السلام وأراد من خلقه الإسلام وأعد للطائعين منهم دار السلام، والصلاة والسلام على نبي الإسلام ومسك الختام ولبنة التمام وعلى آله وصحبه ومن على نهجه مستقام. معالي الشيخ نهيان بن مبارك آل نهيان، وزير التسامح والتعايش بدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة، الحضور الكرام، السيدات والسادة، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. دعوني أفتتح كلمتي بشكر واجب لدولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة وصاحب السمو الشيخ محمد بن زايد حفظه الله على رعايتهم لأهم وثيقة في العصر الحديث، وثيقة الأخوة الإنسانية، واستضافتهم للجنة الدولية العليا للأخوة الإنسانية، والتي أصبحت بفضل الله عنوانا عالميا لمبادرات الأخوة الإنسانية، وذلك بدفع كريم ودعم ومؤازرة من وزارة التسامح والتعايش ووزيرها المبجل معالي الشيخ نهيان بن مبارك آل نهيان. وبعد، فلقد سرتني دعوتكم الكريمة للمشاركة في القمة العالمية بين أصحاب الأديان التي تحمل شعار نحو عالم متعاطف من خلال التسامح والإيمان والتفاهم، والتي تعقد على أرض دولة الإمارات العربية الشقيقة. ويسرني أيضا أن أنقل إليكم تحيات طيبات يهديها فضيلة الإمام الأكبر الأستاذ الدكتور أحمد الطيب شيخ الأزهر الشريف حفظه الله، مع دعوات لهذه القمة بالتوفيق والسداد. واسمحوا لي بداية أن أعرب عن تقدير البالغ لهذا الاختيار الموفق الذي يجمع المتسامحين في يوم التسامح على أرض التسامح. ولقد استطاعت الإمارات من خلال وعي قادتها أن تجعل للتسامح وجوداً إنسانياً ووجوداً حياتياً، فشهدت هذه الأرض المباركة الإعلان عن عام التسامح، وأنشأت جسر التسامح، واستحدثت منصب وزير التسامح، واعتمدت البرنامج الوطني للتسامح وغير ذلك، وكلها صيغ عملية أتاحت لعشرات الجنسيات أن تحيا على أرض الإمارات في أمن وأمان، يعرف كل حقوقه ومسؤولياته. الحضور الكريم، لقد تأملت عنوان اللقاء طويلا، فإذا أوله يرجع إلى آخره وآخره يرجع إلى أوله، فكل مفردات العنوان تؤكد معنى الإيمان الحقيقي الذي لا ظلم فيه ولا بغي ولا إقصاء فيه ولا تهميش ولا ازدراء فيه ولا تحقير بسبب من الأسباب. ومن مصر جئتكم أحمل إليكم تحيات الأزهر والنيل والهرم، وأنقل معنى الإيمان والتسامح الذي عرفته هذه الأرض، فمنذ آلاف السنين عاش المصريون القدماء على ترابها، وكانوا يعتقدون أن المجتمع المثالي على الأرض صورة مطابقة للنظام السماوي الأعلى، فكان ملوكهم يحرصون على إقامة العدل بين الرعية. وقد ورثت الديار المصرية إلى يومنا هذا السلم والسلام، والأمن والأمان والتسامح والتعايش، وقدمت أنموذجاً يحتذى في التعايش السلمي بين أبناء الوطن في ظل مواطنة حقيقية راقية تضمن للجميع حياة مستقرة. الحضور الكريم، إن ثقافة التسامح التي تحيا بها بلادنا في مصر وفي الإمارات وفي غيرها من البلاد هي فضيلة إسلامية إنسانية بامتياز، حث عليها وحي السماء وغرسها في نفوس البشر وضمائرهم من أجل التخلي عن الأمراض الاجتماعية والنفسية والثقافية كالكراهية والحقد والعنف وغيرها من الأمراض التي تترك آثاراً هدامة في حياة الأفراد والمجتمعات. وقد حظيت قيمة التسامح في الشرائع بقسط وافر من النصوص، فما من دين عرفته البشرية إلا ورسالته تحمل السلام والمحبة والعفو. ولو أن أتباع الوحي سلموا قيادهم لنصوصه الواضحة لما خشي أحد على نفسه ولو نام بين ترسانة سلاح، ولا خشي على ماله ولو كان ملقا في عرض طريق. لكن الواقع يشهد أن كثيرا من الناس ممن يدينون بدين سماوي وممن لا يدينون بدين أيضا يفتقدون الأمن والسلام، وتشوب حياتهم مظاهر خوف وفزع، وكأن أوامر السماء وتوجيهات الأنبياء والمرسلين والمصلحين تتردد في عالم غير عالمنا ويخاطب بها غيرنا. العلماء الأكارم، لن أستطرد كثيرا في ذكر أدلة من القرآن والسنة على أهمية التسامح، فالكلام عن فضيلة التسامح صار مألوفا محفوظا، ولكني أشير فقط إلى أن التسامح ضمانة حقيقية لاستقرار الأمم والشعوب ورقي المجتمعات ونهضتها. وأؤكد أن الشرائع التي أنزلها الله عز وجل لا تختلف في أصولها إيمانا بالله الواحد وتصديقا باليوم الآخر ودعوة إلى القيم والفضائل، ما يدل على أنها خرجت جميعا من مشكاة واحدة. وتكاد الشرائع السماوية تتفق في الدعوة إلى الأخلاق ورفض الأفكار والأفعال البشرية المنحرفة، ليس فقط في العناوين العامة، وإنما تكاد تتفق في الألفاظ، ولا غرابة في ذلك، فالله وحده هو الذي شرع القيم والفضائل، وإن اختلفت ألسنة الأنبياء والمرسلين. ثم إن الناظر بتأن فيما تضمنته تعاليم الملل الأخرى يجد بابا كبيرا للتسامح فيها، ما يؤكد أن التسامح بين البشرية مطلب ديني إنساني نبيل أرادته الحكمة الإلهية واقتضته الفطرة الإنسانية السوية وأوجبته النشأة الاجتماعية وفرضته المجتمعات المتحضرة. إن روح التسامح تسري في شريعة موسى عليه السلام، ففي العهد القديم لا تنتقم مما فعله الآخرون بك، ولا تذكر ابن شعبك بذلك، وأحب لغيرك كما تحب لنفسك. وعند عيسى عليه السلام في العهد الجديد لا تدينوا لكي لا تدانوا، لأنكم بالدينونة التي بها تدينون تدانون، وبالكيل الذي به تكيلون يكال لكم. ومن المشهور المسموع ما جاء في الإنجيل: من لطمك على خدك الأيمن فحول له الآخر أيضا، ومن أراد أن يخاصمك ويأخذ ثوبك فاترك له الرداء أيضا، ومن سخرك ميلا واحدا فاذهب معه 2. وأظن أن ملل الأرض تعلي من شأن هذه المعاني النبيلة والقيم الجليلة، لا يختلف عنها في ذلك إلا ملة منحرفة أو تطبيق أعوج. وأما في الإسلام فقد تعددت نصوص القرآن والسنة، وتأتي وثيقة المدينة دليلا عمليا يشرح كيف أقام النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم المجتمع الإسلامي الجديد على التعايش السلمي والتسامح والتعاون بين أبناء المجتمع، فكانت وثيقة المدينة دستوراً ينظم العلاقات بين مكونات المجتمع الجديد مع اختلاف أعراقهم وعقائدهم وتوجهاتهم على أساس متين من المواطنة التي تقيم فيهم العدل وتحفظ عليهم الأمن وتحمي الدولة الجديدة من أي عدوان خارجي. الجمع الكريم، إن الإسلام الذي جاء به رسول الإنسانية محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم لم يقف بالتسامح عند حد التنظير، وإنما نقله إلى واقع حين دعا في آياته إلى العفو والصفح، وجعل مكافأة أهل التسامح أن ينيلهم عفو الله ومغفرته. قال تعالى: إن تبدوا خيرا أو تخفوه أو تعفو عن سوء فإن الله كان عفوا قديرا. وقال عز وجل: وليعفوا وليصفحوا ألا تحبون أن يغفر الله لكم؟ ونقله إلى واقع حين ربى أتباعه من خلال مبادئه وتعاليمه على قبول الاختلاف والتعددية في الحراك العلمي. وهذه الجملة المأثورة عن العلماء والفقهاء ناطقة بذلك، فقد كانوا يقولون: رأيي صواب يحتمل الخطأ، ورأي غيري خطأ يحتمل الصواب. ونقله إلى واقع حين جعل الإيمان بجميع الأنبياء السابقين ركنا من أركان العقيدة. قال تعالى: قولوا آمنا بالله وما أنزل إلينا وما أنزل إلى إبراهيم وإسماعيل وإسحاق ويعقوب والأسباط وما أوتي موسى وعيسى وما أوتي النبيون من ربهم لا نفرق بين أحد منهم ونحن له مسلمون. بل دعا إلى التواصل الفعال مع أتباعهم ما دامت السماحة حاكمة. قال تعالى: لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم أن تبروهم وتقسطوا إليهم إن الله يحب المقسطين. وبهذا التسامح البناء يشهد التاريخ الإسلامي، فكم من دولة وخلافة وإمارة وحكومة عاش فيها جنبا إلى جنب مسلمون وغير مسلمين، والأمثلة كثيرة. وختاما، إن من حق هذا البلد الذي يحرص على استضافة هذه القمة العالمية أن نقدم له الشكر على مبادراته الطيبة وتوجهاته الإنسانية واحترامه التعددية، فهذا هو المحك الحقيقي الذي يفرق به بين الصدق والكذب في حوار الحضارات والتقائها، في الوقت الذي تقوم فيه دول وأجهزة بتجزئة قيم التواصل والتعايش والتسامح، والكيل فيها لا بمكيال واحد ولا بمكيالين بل بعدة مكاييل، فتمنح من حقوق الإنسان وتمنع منها بحسب اللون والجنسية أو غير ذلك من معايير مصطنعة تأباها الفطر السليمة والعقول المستقيمة فضلا عن الأديان. وإننا إذ نشكر هذه التوجهات التي تشتد حاجة العالم المعاصر إليها، فإننا نؤكد أن الإسلام أعدل المناهج لتحقيق التعارف والتواصل، وأن الإسلام يدعم التعايش بين مكونات المجتمع ويهدف إلى خدمة الإنسانية وتحقيق مصالح البشرية. ونؤكد في الوقت نفسه أن التسامح الحقيقي لا يعني التفريط في الحقوق ولا الاعتداء على الخصوصيات ولا مسخ الهويات ولا الإساءة إلى المعتقدات ولا انتهاك حقوق المستضعفين ولا تشويه التاريخ والحقائق، وأن التسامح يمشي على ساقين لا على ساق واحدة، ويرى بعينين لا بعين واحدة، وأن التسامح الذي نبذله لغيرنا لا بد أن يقابله تسامح يبذله غيرنا لنا، وإلا استحال الأمر تخاذلا وهوانا. وإن الأزهر الشريف وهو يمد يده بالسلام والتسامح لكل بني الإنسان يؤكد أن العقيدة ليست مجالا للمساومة ولا المفاوضة، وأن هذه العقيدة نفسها هي التي تأمر بالإحسان والبر والتسامح. ولذا فإن الأزهر لا يرجو لهذا اللقاء التوفيق والسداد والخروج بتوصيات عملية ونتائج ملموسة تجعل من التسامح باب أمل في عيش آمن ومجتمعات مستقرة ويدعم التقدم والتنمية ويخدم القضايا الإنسانية العادلة ويعزز قيم الخير والحق والجمال. وفقكم الله، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you so much, Your Eminence, for your insightful comments on the need for not only tolerance and coexistence, but also forgiveness amongst all of us as we have these important discussions. Well, as we journey on this morning, we are turning our attention to the capital of the UAE and Abu Dhabi. Our next speaker today regards our beautiful capital as his second home, and he has become symbolic in our shared communities with everything associated with fraternity, humility, and a deep respect for interfaith and understanding. It is an honour and a privilege to invite to the podium His Excellency Bishop Paul Hinder, Vicar Apostolic for Southern Arabia, who joins us today to speak about the significance of multilateralism and fraternity and a path to global cohesion. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear friends. In the midst of Expo 2020, it is not only the whole world, but rather global citizens from all over the world who have gathered together in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. The world of business is aware of its dependence on the environment within which it functions. Businesses are now more and more recognizing the need to give back to the environment, to sustain the environment. The environment is not only the natural environment, but also the society within which it lives and transacts. A healthy society is indispensable for a healthy and sustainable economy. Thus, the world of business rightly seeks to discover the building blocks which will sustain it, and thus continue sustaining the world and securing our future. It is in this context that the theme of fraternity, or brotherhood and sisterhood, is explored and has taken center stage during the Tolerance Week of the Expo. Undoubtedly, all of us recognize the role that adherents of the various faiths are called to play in building a world in which each one of us discovers and takes care of each other. I wish to now resume our topic to the recent encyclical letter of Pope Francis titled Fratelli Tutti, which translates as All Brothers and Sisters. The title is borrowed from the opening words of the final testament of St. Francis of Assisi, who had the courage to call not only his fellow human beings, but all of creation his brothers and sisters. The story of St. Francis is the story of man who heard the call of God. Where is your brother? Where is your sister? The search of St. Francis to find the answer to this question led him to cross his native shores of Italy down to Egypt, where he encountered Sultan Malik el-Kamil, and finally returned with joy, having found his brother in a distant land. For St. Francis, the word brother or sister also entitled a great responsibility. This true story from the life of St. Francis is an important lesson for us. It not only teaches us that the brother or sister need to be limited to those of our own ranks, but also that each one of us has the responsibility to search for our brother and sister. It could also be that each one of us may already have discovered such brothers and sisters in our journey through life. These may be both someone who may come to our assistance or someone who may stand in need of our assistance at unexpected times or places. Whenever faced with a genuine human need, this calls for us to allow the capacity and the potential for fraternity within which one of us has expressed itself. The evening of the 4th of February 2019 witnessed the birth of such fraternity when a unique document was signed in the UAE, the document of human fraternity for world peace and living together. Within the document, the two signatories, His Holiness Pope Francis, the head of the Catholic Church, and His Eminence Ahmed Al-Tayeb, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, pledged to work together in 12 different areas which would concretely promote the concept of human fraternity. These are, and I repeat, peace, freedom, justice, dialogue with a view to recepting others, dialogue among believers to promote moral virtue, protection of places of worship, to work against terrorism in all its forms, to work towards the concept of full citizenship and the rejection of the term minorities, fostering good relations between the East and the West, recognizing the right of women to education and employment and to exercise their political rights, protection of the fundamental rights of children to grow up in a family environment, and finally, the protection of the rights of the elderly, the weak, the disabled, and the oppressed. The document, which was drafted after much study and careful thought, witnesses that an adoption of the virtue of fraternity is multilateral. Fraternity in multilateral societies would demand that we too similarly pledge to work together for concrete initiatives in the areas which it outlines. The document calls for study and universal adoption across a wide variety of sectors. Societies which make the prudent investment of building themselves on these solid cornerstones are the cohesive societies that will prove to be healthy ecosystems within which economic models and business systems can function to their full capacity. Today, on World Tolerance Day, within the Expo 2020, as the nations of the world deliberate together to discover pathways to conduct responsible, innovative, and sustainable business which secures not only our future, but also the future of coming generations, may the virtue of fraternity be discovered anew by us all as the pathway to building cohesive and healthy societies of the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I think it's such an important topic that we're talking about today, and how we can encourage a greater constructive dialogue between all of us in order to be able to change our thinking and build bridges between all types of faiths, all different cultures around the world today. Thank you very much. Well, from southern Europe and the beautiful island of Malta in the Mediterranean Sea, we're joined this morning by a very special guest, His Excellency Albrecht Freya von Borsellage, now in his capacity as the Grand Chancellor and Minister of Foreign Affairs at the Sovereign Order of Malta. His Excellency joins us today to explore the topic entitled Interfaith Dialogue and Humanitarian Diplomacy. Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, it's an honor to participate in this important global interfaith summit within the Expo framework that seeks to promote interfaith dialogue and ultimately nurture harmony for peaceful and sustainable coexistence. I am humbled to be part of such a prominent panel and fully embrace the goal of this remarkable initiative. The Sovereign Order of Malta is a 900-year-old Catholic lay institution currently engaged in some of the main humanitarian crises in the world. Our modus operandi is characterized by neutrality and impartiality. The programs run to help the disadvantaged, the refugees, the marginalized, the disabled, and to mitigate the effects of climate change leading to displacement, are at this moment alleviating the suffering of hundreds of thousands of people around the globe. From the beginning, it has been and still is our mission to help those in need, regardless of their origin, religious belief, or ethnic background. This has allowed the Order of Malta and its relief and volunteer corps to enter and be fully involved in crisis and neglected areas, often hostile zones, where medical and social programs have been established in partnership with local organizations, many representing different confessions. These activities are supported by our bilateral and multilateral diplomatic relations. Of the 110 countries with which we enjoy diplomatic relations, 30 are members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, with whom the Order has a long-standing relationship. We also have permanent missions at the United Nations agencies and the European Union. Supporting and advocating for the role of faith-based institutions, facilitating interreligious dialogue, particularly in the Middle East, and promoting humanitarian international laws are today among our primary goals. In the wake of the rising xenophobic and populist movements, the Order of Malta has made countless appeals within the international community to uphold human dignity and human rights. I would like to recall the historical document signed right here in the United Arab Emirates by Pope Francis and the Grand Imam of Al-Aqsa, Ahmed El-Tayeb, in February 2019. Not only is the document on human fraternity for world peace and living together a milestone in relations between Christianity and Islam, but it also contains important messages with a strong impact on the international stage, encouraging all persons who have faith in God and in human fraternity to unite and work together. We are committed to answer the call the Pope and the Grand Imam express in the name of the poor. On the eve of the pandemic crisis, which has also caused deep social disruptions, worsening the living conditions of many people and widening the gap between the rich and the poor, this document is more topical than ever. The Order of Malta firmly believes that persons of peace must join and unite to face these challenges. And in this endeavor, the role of religion and faith leaders is key. It is estimated that by 2050, the global percentage of believers will grow from the current 84% to 87%. Foreign policy and diplomacy are strongly intertwined with religion. Despite this, the role of religion in the foreign affairs of states is still relatively unexplored. To this end, the Order of Malta has recently released a compact called Religions in Action, drafted with the contribution of Christian and Muslim faith leaders, which aims at raising awareness on the global geopolitics of religion. Religion is by nature rooted in communities and is an integral part of a person's identity. The key findings of the compact, Religions in Action, stem from the Order of Malta's experience from working in the field, in crisis areas, the degree of success of diplomacy, with its emphasis on dialogue and negotiation and on mutual respect of different confessions, is unmistakably linked to the capacity to engage with religious communities, religious leaders, and include religious infrastructure. The faith-based diplomacy approach promotes interfaith dialogue and recognizes the key role religious leaders can play in conflict resolution and peace building. The aim of the Compact is precisely to support religious communities and faith-based organizations that dictate their social and spiritual resource to help mitigate the effects of conflict and enhance the delivery of humanitarian support. The document appeals to the moral values that are universally shared by those with faith and other persons of goodwill and which are committed to the protection of human life and dignity. The dialogue among believers, the Pope and the Grand Imam call for means coming together not only for verbal dialogue, but also for dialogue of action. The Order of Malta's commitment towards uniting religions to promote peace are also demonstrated in tangible actions. The Religious Compact finds an example of its intentions in our presence in Lebanon, where for over 20 years we have been running several social and medical services in cooperation with other faith communities, in particular with the Iman al-Sadr Foundation, with the Druze community, as well with the highest Sunni authority, Dar al-Fatwa. This interreligious cooperation has facilitated the intervention of the Order of Malta in very sensitive areas, especially in times of crisis, like the one in Lebanon is facing today. To serve, promote social coherence and advocate peace, justice and respect, the dignity of people of every belief. Before I conclude, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to His Excellency Sheikh Nahyan Marabak Al Nahyan, the Minister of Tolerance and Coexistence of the United Arab Emirates, for promoting such an inspirational gathering that I believe will bring new gist to interreligious dialogue, fostering understanding and mutual respect of the identity of different confessions. Thank you.
Your Excellency, the insights that you gave there and the thoughts are very well received, so thank you very much. There is no doubt that we can all benefit from growth towards one another through diplomacy and interfaith dialogue, so again, thank you for your words. With over 1 billion adherents worldwide, Hinduism today represents 1/7 of the world's population, known as the oldest religion on our planet, and it's referred to as a faith which represents a way of life and is rich and deep-rooted in beliefs, culture, heritage, and its core values. Please join with me in welcoming His Holiness Swami Brahma Viharidis, the religious leader of BAPS Hindu Mandir, Abu Dhabi, to talk with us about the importance of strengthening interfaith as a catalyst for global outreach. Your Holiness.
Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. With these cosmic prayers for peace, I would like to personally thank all of you for being here this morning. Respected and revered national, political, and most importantly, spiritual leaders who have gathered not just because they have been invited, because we have a fire burning in our hearts that harmony, interfaith dialogue is not just a need, it is a most important ingredient for the survival of human race. As we begin, I would like to first tell you that the topic of my talk, Interfaith as a Catalyst for Global Outreach, would be explored in just 3 ways. First, the why. Second, the how. And third, the what. Why interfaith harmony works, and how interfaith harmony helps, and what serious interfaith harmony can contribute to the world. Initially, I would like to remind and remember all of us that the International Day of Tolerance has been dedicated and founded on the 125th anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi in 1995. Mahatma Gandhi specifically said that intolerance is the religion of the negative. As a Hindu, we have grown up on the ideals of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the whole world is one family. The ideal of Yatra Vishwam Bhavati Ekanidam, the whole world is one giant nest. We may be birds of different flights and different feathers, but at the end of the day, we have to come back to the same nest. We have to live together. There is a choice before us. Either we flourish together as a human race, or either we perish forever with disgrace. Most importantly, this universal value of global harmony is not just limited or a prerogative of one religion. Explore the world and we find out that every religion, every culture, every community, every heart and every home believes in global harmony. But most of the time, tolerance, harmony are nouns, beautiful, loaded with meaning. A time has come when we need to turn these nouns into active verbs. In the words of the founder of this nation, His Highness Sheikh Zayed, he did not say that tolerance is beauty, but he did say tolerance is a duty. We need to turn all these beautiful ideas into verbs that really bring a change. And we need to also understand that without personal transformation, there can never be global transformation. We must live what we believe in and must live what we really love. This beautiful small story of the boy and the map of the world will succinctly explain what I mean to say. Once there was a man. He was completely absorbed in reading a magazine, while his son kept constantly pestering and disturbing him. In order to occupy his son, he ripped out one page from the magazine on which there was a map of the world printed. He gave that map to the boy and asked him to study it. For 10 minutes, the boy studied that map of the world. The father then took a pair of scissors and cut that map in 20 pieces. He gave those pieces to his son, hoping that it would take him at least 3 to 4 hours to piece the jigsaw together. To his shock and surprise, his son came back in matter of minutes, fixing the entire world together. When asked, "How could you arrange the map of the world so quickly?" the boy said, "Dad, I never did arrange the map of the world. When you gave me the map of the world, I turned the page over. Behind it was an image of a human being. All I did was arrange the image of the human being. The world came together on its own." I am glad that it was mentioned that once again COVID has compelled us to focus on the human being. And this brings me to my first question. Why interfaith harmony works? Because scientists and behavioral experts tell us that for the well-being of the world, we must focus on the well-being of a person. It also tells us that our being is shaped by our behavior. And our behavior is dictated by our beliefs. The set of beliefs you and I have will create a world vision which we would want to see. So when we talk about a world of beliefs, perhaps no other forces apart from religion, religious leaders, and values can penetrate the world of beliefs in such a way. Perhaps a time has come where we need to re-examine the values and bring those back in all the fields available. What do I mean by that? That of course, beliefs and values dominate our minds. But more importantly, can we bring them to the forefront of life? When we talk about belief, it's our belief in God, our belief in prayers, our belief in love and faith. Just to give you a reconfirmation of what I am saying, it was almost 70 years ago that one of the most famous scientists, Charles Steinmetz, the wizard of electricity, when he was asked that in 50 years to come, in which lines do you think there will be the greatest progress? Charles Steinmetz, not a religious man, he himself many times doubted God. Charles Steinmetz says that in 50 years to come, men and women will realize that material things do not bring happiness. And when that day comes, the scientists will turn their laboratories onto the study of God, prayer, and the spiritual forces. And when that day comes, we shall see more advancement in one generation than we have seen in the past 4. This is what I mean by catalyst. If spiritual forces strengthening our spiritual values and interfaith harmony can create greater progress in every field, they have the power to be civilizational. Now, the second idea, how can interfaith harmony really help? We do not have to go back in past so many years. During the COVID times, the pandemic, when some of the strongest nations on this earth were struggling, the most powerful leaders were uncertain because we were facing a time of abnormalcy. Everything we knew about society had to be set aside. At a time of lockdowns, quarantine, social distancing, if you loved somebody, stay away. At a time where we never really imagined that we would have to be wearing masks. At that time, world leaders did turn to religious leaders. And it was wise that they used the power of spiritual connectivity to create trust in the people so that the world could save itself. We have found that interfaith connectivity helps in social causes. WHO acknowledges the fact that the role of faith-based institutions, faith-based communities, and leaders of spirituality were perhaps more successful in setting an example of all the norms which were more challenging for political leaders. Not only that, they have quoted in one of their reports, and that report says that the followers of these faiths trusted religious leaders more than sometimes even the government and health departments. One survey conducted by Pew, it says, it's very surprising, that 61% of the people decided to be vaccinated because their spiritual leaders said so. We must understand that we are not just a physical or an economic or not just a developmental society. We are basically society of faith and spirituality. When we understand that, we also realize that spiritual connectivity is a catalyst for global outreach. How? Let me explain. In 1984, when our spiritual leader met His Holiness the Pope in Vatican, and when they were asked that what is the reason that spiritual leaders meet, the answer was, when two religious leaders meet, it lessens the bitterness amongst the followers. It generates mutual understanding. It generates respect. We wanted to say that most important fact is, it's not limited just to a country or a place. Let's understand the fact that these leaders have followers across countries, across places, respect across communities. One picture of religious leaders meeting, one word of their dialogue can set a chain reaction of harmony everywhere. Do not underestimate the power of one such visual or one such dialogue. I wanted to re-emphasize that whenever religious leaders meet, even as somebody pointed out, that even a small conference, when we meet, not only the followers change, but even the religious leaders change. We must understand the dialogue we have amongst ourselves should be the same dialogue we have amongst our followers, and should be the same dialogue we have within our own heart. We cannot say something else in public, we cannot say something else in private, and we cannot feel something else. The alignment of spiritual leaders into one arena and the followers can create that magic. But Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, the most loved president of India, he pointed out something that also changed my vision. He said, religious leaders are much more than the leaders of their own followers. I think it's something that we should really think about. He said, each religion is beautiful like an orchard, complete. But unfortunately, religions are like an archipelago, islands, beautiful but disconnected. Real religious leaders are not those who only inspire their own followers. Real religious leaders are those who generate bridge between the islands that are separate. Our role as religious leaders in one way or another should bring not just religions closer together, but should bring our followers closer together to each other. But how can that be possible? Not just by preaching or teaching. Remember, just as God watches over all of us, our followers watch all of us. The acts of a religious leader, they should be inspiring. As His Excellency Sheikh Nayan mentioned when Bishop Paul was moving, and he mentioned that, are you going to say the prayers for us today? Exactly. An idea that he gave is inspired a small incident that I visioned. In 1999, when Our Holiness, His Pramukh Swami Maharaj, he visited Israel. I was with him. But he did not just visit the Church of Nativity in Bethlehem, he sat and prayed there. He did not just visit the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. When he saw people folding pieces of paper and putting them in crevices, he asked, what are people doing? Somebody explained that prayers are written by the Jewish people and they're placed in those crevices as a form of prayer. His Holiness Pramukh Swami, to my surprise, he took 2 flowers. One flower he placed and sat in prayer. The other flower he placed and sat in prayer. When we asked, what were you doing praying at a holy place of some another religion? Do you know what he said? He said, my first prayer was that may all the prayers which have been said in the past, may they be answered by God. And the second prayer, may all the prayers which are said from henceforth in the future, may they be answered as well. When religious leaders act in a way that increases the importance of holy places and scriptures of other religions, it generates a dynamic feeling. And lastly, I would like to ask, most importantly, what can faith and interfaith harmony do for the world? Well, you do not have to go far. I want to emphasize all your holinesses and the eminences and all the people who genuinely love us, that remember, nothing is small on this earth and nothing is too big on this earth. Remember, an act of terror anywhere hurts humanity everywhere. And an act of harmony anywhere helps humanity everywhere. Our experience in this land of tolerance, the UAE, imagine His Highness the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, he gifted free land to build a Hindu temple. A Muslim king giving land to a Hindu temple where our lead architect is a Christian Catholic, where our main consultant is a Chinese of no religion, where our project director was a Sikh of another religion, where our structural engineer is a Buddhist, Mr. Kong, where our contractors are Parsis, and where our chairman of the trust comes from a Jain tradition. I want to ask, where can there be such a combination of people working voluntarily in charity to create a spiritual oasis for global harmony? It can happen in UAE. In this place, there are not just global meets, there are global heartbeats. I have experienced that heartbeat of tolerance and harmony. I only request if simple lay followers can get together to create such a wonderful, once in a millennium place for global harmony. When religious leaders get together, when we begin to dream the same dream, in the same sequence, for the same rhythm, in the same reason, I believe the core of spirituality together can change the core of humanity. Of course, it's not just a catalyst. It has the power to produce a worldwide web. Nope. Bigger than that, a cosmic web of faith will protect all of us. Let us pray that we walk in that same path. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Holiness, for sharing with us a rich portrayal of the strategic importance of enacting human core values in everything we aspire to achieve as human beings. Thank you very much. Now, our interfaith journey this morning and this afternoon now provides us with an opportunity to meet Rabbi David Shlomo Rosen, who, in his capacity as the American Jewish Committee's International Director of Interreligious Affairs, will share with us his thoughts on the pertinent topic of why interreligious understanding matters. Rabbi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, to many of you, you don't need to be introduced to me, so I'm very happy to be here amongst many friends. And I thank those of you who have had the patience to wait this long to be here. My commiserations for those who have to follow after me. As you see, I've been asked to address the subject as to why interreligious understanding matters. And if you haven't understood that by now, then probably this event should already close down, because it's been addressed very extensively. So really, after everything you've heard for as long as you've heard it, is there a need for me to say anything? Absolutely not. And therefore I should sit down. But that would be churlish of me towards my host, so I will briefly share with you something from a personal context. In the 1970s, early 1970s, I was a very young rabbi in South Africa, until eventually the government kicked me out. That was the height of apartheid, the iniquitous evil system that sought to separate people, keep them apart because of their color or race. It was very important for me, in my role as a rabbi of a community, to be seen to be engaged in the struggle against this evil. And I wanted my community also to be seen to be involved in the struggle against this evil. That was not easy, because we were living in a police state, and any action could automatically mean that you were thrown into jail or kicked out of the country, as eventually I was. One of the few ways we could get people to come together was through religion. Now, in the 1970s, early 70s, this was not common in the world, let alone in South Africa. There had never been any interreligious body. And I moved around the different religious leaders saying, you know, pastor, bishop, sheikh, the things that bring us together are so much more important than the things that keep us apart. And eventually we created an interfaith forum, a council of Christians, Muslims, and Jews. It did many important things. I'm not here to tell you about the history of this council. But it opened up my eyes. I came to interfaith relations out of a commitment to social justice. But as I got involved, I realized it was something far more than simply that. The first revelation for me was how ignorant these Christian and Muslim leaders were about me and my religion and my heritage. I thought, surely they must know about Judaism, something of the bedrock of the Abrahamic family. I discovered there were stereotypes, misunderstandings, and an amazing amount of ignorance. But as I engaged them, I realized, yes, they were surprisingly ignorant about me. But you know what? I discovered I was amazingly ignorant about them. I thought I knew what they were. I had misunderstandings, stereotypes, ignorance of my own. I realized that if I want to be understood, I need to understand. And therefore, interreligious, interfaith relations is first and foremost an essential means of overcoming bigotry, prejudice, and ignorance that are afflictions in society. But as I continued in this path, I discovered something further. These are people not only who shared deep values that I believed in, but were remarkable examples of dedication to those values. And if we say we believe in the dignity of the human person, in the transcendent presence of the divine, in the values of justice, of righteousness, in the promotion of peace, then don't we have an obligation to work together with those who believe in those values? Indeed, to fail to do so is to fail our own religious traditions. And then I realized that the most important value of all our religions teach, all the religions, was the promotion of peace. I then understood the deeper meaning, first of all with my own tradition, of a verse in the prophet Malachi, 2,500 years ago. Malachi writes in chapter 3, verse 16, "Then those who revere the God spoke with one another. And God listened and heard and wrote it down in the book of those who revere him and who respect his name." It's a strange verse. What's the big deal about speaking with one another? That God takes such special note and this is preserved for posterity. As I discovered other religions and as I came to know Islam, I discovered that Islam has even a more powerful message. than that one. And you all know it. From chapter 49, verse 13 in Surah Al-Hujarat, we have created you from a single couple and made you into peoples and nations that you may know one another. What's the big deal about knowing one another? The answer, of course, is that when we know one another and when we talk with one another, then we cannot make the same negative presumptions we make when we do not know one another and when we do not talk with one another. The more we truly know of one another, the more we truly speak with one another, the more we overcome those negative impressions and the more we understand and respect one another. That is essential for the promotion of peace. So, interreligious relations is first of all, and the reason that it's important, significant, is to fight bigotry, fight prejudice, fight ignorance, promote the values that we believe in, work together to be greater than the sum of our different parts. But finally, I would suggest that there is something else. As I encounter these other religions, I reflected on a question that I had never ever reflected upon before. I had never really sought to understand what the meaning might be of the existence of other religions. What is God saying to me in all this, with all these different religious traditions? And I realized something that I think is very essential. We often grow up within particular religious traditions, so we never even consider what may be the significance beyond our own religious tradition. Often we think everything is to be found within our own religious tradition. Often we think everything that could be known about God can be known within our religious tradition. Isn't that ridiculous? God is more than any one religious tradition. Any one religious tradition, no matter how wonderful, can only be a partial glimpse of the divine. And when we encounter one another in sincerity, we discover more of the glory of God's creation. But when we encounter one another out of the sense of God's presence in the world and in our lives, then we get a glimpse of the divine beyond our own religious tradition and heritage. I think this is critically important because one of the biggest problems, if we're going to be honest, we often say, the problem is not religion in the world. Religion is abused. And that's true. Most places where there's conflict and people say it's religious conflict, it's not a religious conflict at all. These are territorial conflicts which manipulate, exploit religion. That's true, but we can't let religion off the hook. Religion has done, in the name of religion, terrible things have been done. What is the source of that misbehavior? Well, there are many reasons for it. And His Excellency, the Imam from Al-Azhar, has mentioned about the problems of insecurity and the problem of lack of stability within. All these things are true. But there has often been within history the presumption of one religion that we have the truth and all others are in error, and therefore we must impose our truth upon others. And what we need to avoid that dangerous pitfall, because it is a dangerous one, is what we can call theological humility. The humility to know that we do not have all the answers, that there are different paths to the divine, that we can learn from one another, that we should learn from one another, and that when we have that theological humility, we can ensure that we are true to the most noble values of our own heritage. So interreligious understanding is important to protect against evil. It's important to pursue good. It's important to pursue peace. All these things as Psalm 34 explicitly directs us. It is also important for the health of our own religious traditions. Through our interfaith engagement, we can ensure that we are true to the most noble and sublime of the values of our heritage. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. I have to say, I absolutely love your passion for this topic and such a refreshingly honest account about some of the challenges that we face, particularly when you were talking about the issues of ignorance and stereotypes. And I thought your own personal story about how important it is that in order to be understood ourselves, we must also be able to understand others. So thank you so much. What an incredible speaker you are. Thank you. And speaking of incredible speakers, I'm very excited to welcome our next guest back to the stage. His Excellency Miguel Angel Morantinos, the High Representative for the United Nations Alliance of Civilization, who in his capacity as a senior member of the House of Nations is a foremost authority on the subject of multilateralism and the importance of collaborative actions that must be taken by countries and organizations right around the world for the true benefit of bridging societies everywhere. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much again, all my dear friends, religious leaders. I really thank the people who still are with us at this hour of the day. And I feel privileged to address for the second time this distinguished audience in front of eminent religious leaders and faith actors, extremely enlightening speeches of my predecessors in the podium, all of them with a clear message to all of us in order that we want to work together, and how important the religious leader and the faith-based organization are crucial in today's world. My dear friends, if we are sincere, the global context today is gloomy. Hate, division, conflict, we have every day. You watch the TV, you watch the news, you got the WhatsApp, and all that you receive are negative images and negative events. People whose identity are defined by religion, culture, and ethnicity continue to be besieged by hatred. So, my dear friends, it is time for usher a new era of peace, trust, and mutual respect. It is trying to demonstrate that fraternity, compassion, and humility, as my friend David Rosen mentioned, are absolutely necessary. It is time to remind to all of us the vital and indispensable role of religious leaders and faith-based organizations. I can tell you, I've been touring the world in order to draft this UN plan for protecting and safeguarding religious sites. And I can tell you solemnly here in Dubai that the spirituality is back, my friends. I think the Western society, we say the 20th century, and Nietzsche said God is dead. Today, spirituality is back. And the proof of that is that we are all together here. The problem is that religion is being hijacked by groups and twisted by the intolerant ideology to justify incitement to violence conducive to acts of terrorism, discrimination, and xenophobia. This ideology seeks to divide humanity based on false version and interpretation of religion, cultural, and social values. And no one can deny the short and long-term damaging result of this factor on international peace and security, as well on development effort. My dear friends, over the past 2 weeks, world leaders gathered in COP26 summit in Glasgow. They had been sending apocalyptic warning of the dismayed future of our planet if a firm collective action is not taken now to curb carbon emission to save the planet. That is very true. But my dear friend, also extremely crucial to save our humanity. It's not only to save the planet, we have to save ourselves. And I think the only answer is how we are going to live together, peacefully, in inclusive and diverse society of this planet. Just because one day we can wake up ourselves and have a green environment, even here in Dubai or in Europe, and breathe a very nice air, but we can't respect each other. And we'll have not a green environment, we'll have a dark human environment that don't respect each other, all of us. And I think His Eminence Bishop Paul Hinter said rightly that we have this, let's say, comprehensive environment, traditional considered environment, and this human environment that we have to protect. And that's where the United Nations Alliance of Civilization has long recognized the value added of religious leaders and faith-based organizations. Hence, we expanded a unique global platform for interfaith dialogue, intercultural and interracial dialogue as a critical tool against isolation, mistrust, and confrontation. It is also the most powerful vector for conflict prevention, of conflict resolution. Yes, David Russell, we cannot solve conflict and crisis in the world only through religion involvement. But without taking into account the religion and cultural dimension of crisis and conflict, will not solve the conflict neither. So we have to start to work in a comprehensive manner. Of course, there is a negotiation process that have to take into consideration the political element, but we have also to introduce why these crises are present and how we can solve them, taking into account this element. And then let me reflect very quickly about this false debate about identity. Of course, we have each of us our own identity. But I have, and I think all of us, we have a multiple identity. I was born in Madrid, so I feel Madrileño. I was born in Spain, so I feel Spanish. I live in Europe, I feel European. I've been working in the Middle East and Mediterranean, I feel Mediterranean, Middle East. I'm now in the UN and working for the global citizenship, and I feel a global citizen of the world. So why we have to exclude and reduce our identities? So I think, as Pope Francis said, when he started this fantastic adventure about human fraternity, that it doesn't mean that he is going to renounce to his personal and his profound belief in Catholicism, in his religion, in his identity, but it doesn't. That means that they cannot listen, they cannot respect, he cannot approach others in order to understand better the relationship between different religion and faith. So I think even we have this gloomy atmosphere around ourselves. Let's say also that we have a very good story to tell though. And this story happened here, in this beautiful and proud country of the United Arab Emirates. And that is the document of His Holiness, Pope Francis, and His Eminence, Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Ahmed Tayyib. I was here when they signed the document on the 4th of February 2019. It was my first visit as High Representative of the United Nations Alliance of Civilization to Emirates, and was my first visit as High Representative of the United Nations. And I think that document, the Human Fraternity document, that by the mandate of Secretary General Antonio Guterres asked me to distribute to the 193 member states of the United Nations, is a blueprint for interfaith dialogue, and not only among one or two faiths, but it encompasses all faiths. And history has shown that dialogue is not a simple process, that if we fail to teach and cultivate it, the situation can give way to a monologue or to mutism, which is conducive to conflict and violent extremism. So be sure, both main providers of this Human Fraternity document, that the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres and the United Nations Alliance for Civilization are ready to help them to implement on the ground a kind of plan of action in order to make this document a real instrument for peace and stability. So to conclude, my dear friends, let me reiterate the words like dialogue, fraternity, diversity, and respect. And please try to exert, each of us, every day, every month, every year, this common message. Because at the end of the day, as I said at the beginning, is the motto of our organization, we are many cultures, many religions, many civilizations, but we are one humanity. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for those inspiring words. And, I thought you were so accurate when we talk so much these days about focusing on climate change, about trying to save the beautiful planet that we live in. We also need to make sure that we're working on saving each other and having these collaborative conversations, trying to understand each other, encourage greater tolerance, greater forgiveness, and greater understanding. Thank you so much for your thoughts today. Well, from the heart of our beloved Dubai, our next speaker is a distinguished community leader whose selfless acts of giving and generous demeanour are core values that he naturally espouses and shares with everyone in the community. In his capacity as the co-founder and chairman of the Guru Nanak Darbar Sikh Temple in Dubai, please welcome Mr. Surinder Singh Kandari to the podium. And today he's going to be sharing with us his thoughts on the topic, the UAE, a beacon of interfaith tolerance and understanding. Thank you very much.
Namaskar. Good afternoon. First, I would like to thank the Ministry of Tolerance and Coexistence to invite me for this summit. And secondly, I want to thank all of you who are waiting back to listen to me. Thank you very much. I've been in Dubai 45 years, so I think I'm capable to talk about this subject because the UAE is the beacon of tolerance and understanding. I always feel one thing. Tolerance is a word spoken everywhere, every time, but I would like to change the word of tolerance to acceptance. I think we should learn to accept each other, respect each other, and try to follow each other's good values and good virtues. The subject which I've given today is also a chapter in my book. I wrote a book 2 years ago on, the title is The Lighthouse of Tolerance. And this subject is one of my chapters, and I'd like to I feel I'm going to read my book. Anyway, the UAE is committed to be at the forefront of enabling harmonious coexistence among all religions and cultures in propelling progressive society to the value of tolerance. And this commitment was manifested to the Sikh community by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the Vice President and Prime Minister of the UAE and the ruler of Dubai, when he gave 25,000 square feet of land free to a community to build the most modern Sikh temple in Dubai, for which the whole community is indebted to him. And we have promised him one thing. Apart from being just a Sikh temple, it will be a community center. Because Sikhism as a religion is a way of life where our founder Guru Nanak Dev Ji always said, before you be a good Muslim or a good Christian or a good Hindu, be a good human being. If you are a good human being, you can serve other human beings, you can serve the children of God, and that is being practiced in the UAE very, very seriously. The respect of otherness of others is very much practiced in the UAE, and there are 200 nationalities living in peaceful harmony and coexistence. And I believe the leadership is responsible for this environment and for this atmosphere. The Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi and Deputy Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, ordered the construction of the Abrahamic Family House in Abu Dhabi to commemorate the historic visit of Pope Francis and Grand Imam Ahmad al-Tayyab, to reflect the peaceful coexistence of different communities in the UAE. It's truly an ambitious initiative by the leadership and by the announcement to build an Abrahamic family house, a massive new landmark in Abu Dhabi's Saadiyat Island that will bring a church, a mosque, and a synagogue within the same collective space to create a community for interfaith dialogue and for understanding and acceptance of different religious faiths, beliefs, and nationalities and cultures. Also, the new treaty signed by UAE and Israel is the UAE's commitment to regional cooperation. The UAE has made tolerance into a global initiative and sets the standards of unity in diversity at another level. This approach is a defense against the toxic influences of the parochial mindset. Our Sikh temple, the Gurdwara Guru Nanak Darbar in Dubai, together with other houses of worship, including mosques, churches, and temples, make up the shining beacon of tolerance in the UAE. They uplift each other, uphold universal truths, and peacefully live side by side with people of over 200 nationalities and multiple religious groups. The Gurdwara serves both the Sikh community and the community at large, because in our Gurdwara, we welcome Christians, Muslims, Hindus, everybody. Because we all are children of one God, we're all together, we're all one, we're all human beings. And this has been manifested in the UAE in a very great way where everybody respects each other, and the anti-hatred law which is passed in the UAE also makes a big difference. Nobody is allowed to hate anybody else. And if you hate somebody, he's punished. That is the best part, I can say, a government is doing to support diversity, tolerance, and acceptance. UAE also is a country which has a Ministry of Tolerance, the only country in the world which has a Ministry of Tolerance. And our dear friend, His Excellency Sheikh Nahyan bin Mubarak Al Nahyan, is the beacon of this movement, a man who inspires us all. His action, his enthusiasm supports everybody, and everybody is a friend. And whenever we go to meet him, he's very warm and hospitable, and that shows the respect for each other. The value of tolerance and acceptance was also manifested when His Highness Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the Crown Prince of the Emirate of Abu Dhabi and Deputy Supreme Commander of the UAE Armed Forces, renamed the Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Mosque in Abu Dhabi to Maryam Isa, the Arabic for Mary, Mother of Jesus, breaking barriers of exclusivity. There is no doubt that mechanisms employed to settle disputes among traditional tribal society also played an important role enhancing the values of tolerance in Emirati culture. These dispute resolution strategies included the use of mediation, compromise, wisdom, and drawing on a rich source of moral values that characterized desert society. Resolutions were only possible because of an existing framework that allowed for mutual concession, forgiveness, overcoming animosity, granting clemency instead of retaliation, and many more noble moral values. These values are deep-rooted in the hearts of the UAE sons and daughters, passed down from one generation to another. And here I quote Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan when he exemplifies how tolerance was the overriding principle governing dispute resolution and settlement in UAE society. He said, tolerance is a duty. If God, the greatest, the Almighty Creator, is forgiving, we human beings are all brothers. The righteous is our brother. The sinner is our brother. We don't abandon the sinner, nor do we desert him. Instead, we should rescue the support him until he's back on the right path. The UAE society first experienced diversity in beliefs, denominations, and religions a long time ago. This was clearly evidenced by the archaeological excavations on the Sub-Banias Island in 1992. The discoveries revealed that the island was home to the oldest Christian church and monastery in the area, dating back to the period between the 7th and 8th century AD. This may explain UAE's citizens' remarkable ability to accept diversity and their tendency towards moderation, centrism, and acceptance. The discovery of the monastery brought conclusive evidence of the coexistence and long prevailed between the conclusive evidence of coexistence that has long prevailed between Christians and Muslims. It is coexistence also embodied in the words and deeds of late Sheikh Zayed and the UAE leadership over many years, to treat every person, no matter what his creed or race, as a special soul is a mark of Islam. Sheikh Zayed once said, the UAE continues to follow Sheikh Zayed's example, and the nation has become a model for moderation, inclusion, and generosity in the Middle East. As the UAE continues to grow, so is its religious diversity growing. Christians, Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jews, and many others call UAE their home. And today UAE has over 40 churches, 2 Hindu temples, 1 Gurdwara Sikh temple, 1 monastery, which is a Buddhist temple. Undoubtedly, all these are catalysts to interfaith harmony, respecting each other, respecting the otherness of others. No two human beings are the same. No two brothers and sisters are the same. But once we realize that we all are human beings, we all are children of one God, we can grow to become a happier and healthier place. The UAE leadership and people is a melting pot of tolerance, cohesion, respect and acceptance of the other. Tolerance is an intrinsic value and key trait of the UAE social fabric. It is built on the concept of middleness in Islam, inspired by genuine Arabic noble traditions and cultural heritage, and is enlightened by the wisdom and legacy of the founding father, the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan. National Program for Tolerance makes every effort to promote and craft these values based on solid structures towards ensuring their future sustainability under the guidance of a wise leadership that caters to building human beings, making the world a better place for humanity. I would like to conclude that Almighty has different ways so He made different people. It is for us to change, for us to be involved with all humans and live in peace and harmony. The more we interact, the more we meet, the more we engage into a dialogue, and the more we can appreciate each other. One has to respect the otherness of others. We all must live together as one family. And UAE is one country which promotes this system of one family. We are all together as one human being, one race. And I must say, I am grateful to the vision of the rulers of the UAE who have made this country into the most vibrant country in the world. And today, after the expo is being opened, the whole world wants to come to Dubai. And Dubai is so famous. Like I was telling, I was in Tasmania in Australia, and I was in a taxi, and the guy asked me, "Where are you from?" I said, "Dubai." "Wow, I want to go there. I've heard so much about that country." Like every person in Tasmania has heard about Dubai. That's the power of Dubai, power of UAE, and I wish the country all the best. I wish you all the best. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Thank you so much for your inspiring words. I have to say, I've lived in Dubai for more than 13 years now, and something that always astounds me is the fact that we have more nationalities here in the UAE than we do at the United Nations. And the opportunities for these collaborative discussions, I think, are so important. I loved your stories as well. You know, we were talking a little bit about the Abrahamic family house in Abu Dhabi with a church, a mosque, and a synagogue. And, you know, something like that, such a revolutionary example of architecture and how it can bring faiths together. together is just so exciting to be a part of here in the UAE. Thank you very much. Well, our final speaker for today joins us all the way from Italy. I'm delighted to welcome Imam Yahya Sergio Yahe Pallavicini. He is the president of the Islamic Religious Community of Italy and a CISCO ambassador for dialogue among civilizations. Imam Yahya is an incredible authority on the importance of utilizing the common word in order to advance dialogue and peace amongst religious communities and people of the world. Please join with me in welcoming Imam Yahya to the podium, who today will speak about the topic entitled Interreligious Engagement and the Peaceful Narrative of Islam.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Thank you for this very kind invitation and for the patience for bearing with me for some minutes before the break. I actually had two invitations. The invitation to deliver some thoughts on the engagement, and the other invitation was for lunch by His Excellency the Ambassador of Italy here. So I think that we will all eventually try to be brief and go for our break, but let me give you also the Italian taste, if I may say, of the experience having been here in Abu Dhabi for the Fraternity Declaration with Pope Francis and the great Imam Sheikh Al-Azhar Ahmed Al-Tayyib, to give also maybe some critical issues on how, at least from Europe or in the West, there are some obstacles to this engagement and how we can probably overcome together through tolerance, through understanding, some maybe more practical or concrete solutions. I was thinking also there is this sentence that was managed on from the Italian embassy on the beauty that unites persons, and which in front of the deputy of Sheikh Al-Azhar as an imam of the Mosque of Milan, that has been dedicating his last sermons on the teachings of Sheikh Salih Al-Ja'fari radiallahu anhu. I think that there's this verse of the Holy Quran that says, Allahul Jamil wa yuhibbul Jamal. God is beauty and He loves beauty. But the terms that are used are different. Al-Jamil is the attribute of God as the essence of beauty, the spiritual reality of beauty, the attribute of reality, the sacred beauty. And the love for beauty is in somehow His way of bridging the manifestation of beauty in signs and in immanence of creatures and creation. And as believers, as citizens, we actually, if we find an inspiration in loving beauty, we might probably succeed to be more brothers, more tolerant, more respectful of our identity and of the truth of reality, instead of, unfortunately, witnessing the horror of some situations that are going against brotherhood or against peace, according to Islam and according to all religious doctrines. Fraternity, of course, can be something that is a synonym of familiarity, of a union of two or several human beings, or even, according to some other dimensions, it's a contemplative common approach. So we are contemplating His beauty, His signs, our responsibilities in different ways, but we are united in this action to contemplate and to manage this responsibility. But on the other side, the Islamic doctrine, as other doctrines, describe people that can be brothers as children of the same family, such as Cain and Abel, or Ismail and Isaac, or Moses and Harun. And they interpret this brotherhood not through fratricide, but through a noble lineage working to complement each other on a mission to give testimony and adore to one same God. So respecting fraternity does not in fact mean defending Cain no matter what, or justifying the envy of the brothers of the prophet Joseph, who staged his death, turning his father, the prophet Jacob, blind with pain, or exalting Aaron's qualities of understanding and communication, or acting as rivals over the primacy or promise and sacrifice to be associated with Ishmael or Isaac. Fraternity can never be respected if the defense of a weakness is flaunted, and due to incorrect compensation, there is a tendency to scale down and relativize the strength of faith of another brother. If this were the case, this compensation would in actual fact undermine the fraternity to the detriment of its sacred identity in the order of God, to promote a fraternal communion devoid of reference to the tradition of prophecy, without love for the Father and for the nature and purpose of religion. By on one hand, therefore, traditional sources remind us of the virtue of the elect who overcome the mystification of doctrine or the ignorance of religions. On the other hand, they remind us of the awareness of the dark and perverse side of the soul in the decadence of times. It is paradoxical that some worshippers of sacred texts seem to be radically disinterested in these two operational aspects, election and purification, manipulating religion into a game of power or humanitarian moralism. In the inspired awareness of this profound intellectual crisis, Pope Francis meets, talks, and testifies with other spiritual authorities, the Israeli rabbis, the Patriarch Bartolomeo and Patriarch Kirill, Imam At-Tayyib and Ayatollah al-Sistani. He presents an integral fraternity without claiming to represent it in an absolute, let alone relative way. But he is open to recognizing a sacred dignity that his colleagues interpret as authoritative servants of the Spirit and teachers of a blessed religious expression of the same family of Abraham. So again, Pope Francis' intuition to suggest as a rule in one of his sermons that no one is saved alone, citing the image of a boat in which we are all forced together, has perhaps the value of a test of humility for Christians, but also for other believers. As all we believers in the call of eschatology to the meaning of faith and of life. In this image, not perhaps also a common religious perspective in all doctrines? And so in the light of the sign of the times, this fraternity cannot fail to be a religious and spiritual alliance in which every believer needs to purify himself of the weights and superstructures that risk sinking the boat or excluding him from the ark of seeds of the 7 laws of Noah. The pact between God and man is the fulcrum of the Ark of the Covenant, which must be inhabited by custodians of tradition who are loyal to the sacred, sensitive to the action of metaphysics, to the transcendence as well as to the immanence of God. It is certainly a sacred interreligious fraternity, because it assumes at the end of time a character that truly embodies migration, liberation, illumination, elevation, and extinction in satisfying a taste, dhawq, of the presence of God. This is why the search for an election and purification can only be found among observant believers who share an affinity for humble service and sincere contemplation. These last two words, contemplation and service, play the role of supporting and protecting the path to stations unveiling fraternity in traditional life, in the community, and in the world. Even in the history of Islamic tradition, contemplative orders have helped to preserve and retransmit the intellectual renewal, Imam Mujaddid, of a rule of spiritual support and protection to cultivate the way to know God. And this election will not be able to be fulfilled if no barrier is placed, even at an external level, to the madness of violence and hatred, where everyone invokes and believes in their own mental and emotional construction of divinity without any tolerance, but with hatred and violence against the other believers and citizens. We are too convinced, as Muslim believers living in Europe, as Pope Francis writes in his encyclical letter, that truth, in fact, is an inseparable companion of justice and mercy. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, "I am the closest of the people to Jesus in this life and in the hereafter. There is no prophet between me and him. The prophets are paternal brothers. Their mothers are different, but their religion is one." Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your inspiring message of hope today. Well, before I introduce the closing act for this magnificent Global Interfaith Summit today, please allow me a moment to, on behalf of the Ministry of Tolerance and Coexistence and the Italian Pavilion, to thank His Excellency Sheikh Nahyan Mubarak Al Nahyan, UAE Minister of Tolerance and Coexistence, as well as their eminences, their holinesses, their excellencies, and to you, all of us, our distinguished guests, for being a part of this important gathering today. And we very much look forward to seeing you at our next edition of the Global Interfaith Summit.